Welcome, I'm Dan Summery with Advocatecitizen.com, where we bring important issues to the forefront. The 18th Congressional District, which runs from 1960 Champions to Humble down to the Medical Center and many areas in between due to redistricting, is approximate 732,000 population. There's a key House Representatives election this November between the incumbent Sheila Jackson Lee and her opponent, Republican candidate Col Sean Seibert. It is also fair to note that we did invite Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, but she failed to respond. We're welcoming Col Sean Seibert for the Republican candidate. Thank you for joining me here today.
It's a pleasure to be here, Dan.
Sean, tell me a little bit about yourself. What brought you into politics, and who is Sean Seibert?
Well, I started off as a young kid from an immigrant mother, and she would have us debate politics growing up. And I always had it in my blood, and I said, you know, when I get older, I want to get involved in politics. And I was waiting until my military career was over. When I got back from Afghanistan in 2010, a friend of mine said someone wanted to meet me. It turned out it was Judge Poe, Congressman Poe.
Ted Poe.
Yes, and after an hour and a half of him discussing and talking with me, he goes, do this, do this, do this, and we want you to run. And so I started my first campaign ever against Miss Sheila Jackson Lee in 2000.
That was 2012.
Correct. And the whole purpose of my life has been chasing a dream to help people. And I got in the military to help this country. I joined the military police, which once again were helping the soldiers inside. And my whole life has always been fighting for those who can't fight for themselves. And it's just a national progression to go into Congress and do it at a limited time and then get out. I have no desire to be in Congress for more than 10 years. I want to get in there, maybe 4 terms, and that's it, and then get out and have other things in life to do. So
she's been in office since '95.
Yes.
Do you think that's too long for any politician to be in office for?
Yes, like the Republican platform calls for, term limits. We have term limits in the city of Houston. They're looking at putting term limits on some of our judges. I think there should be term limits on everybody. We have it on the president. And why do we have career politicians? Our Constitution and our government was designed as a citizen's statesman. You come to Washington, do the business, and go back home. And Robert Gates is a good example. When the country needs him, he comes and works, and he goes back to the private sector. Any congressman, Republican or Democrat, that's been in office for more than 10 years needs to be kicked out. I don't care if you like him. I love Judge Poe, and he's coming up on his 10th year in Congress, and I think this should be his last year. I think Cornyn, he needs to be out. This should be his last term. Anybody, Republican or Democrat, should not make this a career for themselves.
So would it be fair to say if you were elected, you'd put a self-imposing, because it may be lost a word. It may be a miracle for it to pass Congress term limits.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'll put a self-imposed, just like Teddy Roosevelt self-imposed himself in the term limits, and that's why he only did 1 term, because he did 3 years of McKinley's term. But he said, standard is, the tradition is 2 terms, I'm not going to run again, which he would have got reelected. I will put, if I get elected, I will say no more than 5 terms, period.
That's fair.
And I will submit a bill within my first term to have term limits applied to Congress.
Let's talk about your military a little. You're a colonel with the U.S. Army.
Yes.
Long career, 31 plus years. How has that prepared you? Is that giving you the discipline to become a U.S. congressman, you think?
Yeah, well, part of it started off as a private. And I was really happy because I used to watch Rat Patrol as a kid, and all I wanted to do was ride in the back of a Jeep and shoot machine guns. My first job as a military police private was on the back of a Jeep as a machine gunner. That started giving me the discipline. Then I became an officer and started getting different assignments where I had to work with different cultures and different organizations. My last 5 years in the military has really prepared me. When I was in Afghanistan in 2009, 2010, I was working with different organizations. I had to sit down every Sunday with the Pakistani and Afghan representatives from their government and negotiate things between the two and find common ground and get solutions. Now, the Pakistanis and the Afghanis do not like each other.
Right.
To say one treats the other one like a redheaded stepchild is an understatement. They have some serious dislike. But to get them to come to the table and agree on items is something that can be used in Congress. That means I can talk to Democrats and get Democrats and independents, libertarians, and Republicans to agree on something that's good for the nation. And like Ted Poe said, Any legislation that's been good legislation in our history has been bipartisan. Bad legislation is partisan. So people go, oh, you can't compromise. No, our government's built on compromise. You have to be able to talk to the Democrats and sit down and find common ground to move this country forward and make serious changes to help this country for the future.
Let's talk about an issue, man. Let's talk about the VA hospital a little bit, the scandal of the veterans not getting care, years and years, months and months of waiting for simple medical care. Is that more of a political issue? Is it money? What's the issue there?
Well, first of all, it's not a scandal. And everyone wants to say this is President Obama's fault, this is the Democrats' fault. No. The VA has had a problem since its inception. Both parties have known about what's going on. You can go back all the way. The government has not treated them properly. After the Revolutionary War, veterans had to go complain about getting their money. After the World War I, same thing. The VA problem that's going on right now has been there forever. And my issue is, if a single payer, government-funded insurance is not good enough for the American citizens, why is it being pushed down on veterans? Why do I have to suffer by going through a socialized medicine? The better thing is, like when I came off active duty in December, I was issued a ID card and said, here's your 180 days transitional insurance. I go to a private doctor, everything's taken care of. Our veterans should be the same way. Instead of going to the VA hospital, you're issued a TRICARE insurance card, and this is your insurance plan, and now you get to go to your doctor of choice out in the community, instead of being forced into the VA system. The problems that are going on now have been there for decades, and they are going to be there for decades. Firing Shinseki, who needs to go, the entire leadership needs to go, and then do a complete overhaul, and move the care of our veterans out of a centralized government-run institution and put it back in the private hands. Give our veterans an ID card, an insurance card, and they can go to their doctors they need, and they'll get the treatment very quickly. Anybody who's been a veteran has horror stories. I can spend the next hour telling you all my horror stories when I use the VA. So, yeah, it's systematic. It's the entire bureaucratic system there. And it's the doctor, the care you get in the VA. When you get to see a doctor, once you finally get there,
from what I hear, is excellent.
It's excellent.
Yeah.
I have nothing against the medical staff. It's getting through those bureaucrats that get there to get to that doctor is a pain in the butt. And it turns out the VA has become a jobs program for the government, just to hire people and keep hiring people instead of making it smoother and faster. And I challenge everybody, on a Monday or Tuesday, go down to your local VA and walk around between 8 and 9 o'clock. And after you do that, just listen, observe, and then go post what you saw and heard. And let me tell you, if you think that's good enough for the veterans, then I think the entire country should go to a single-payer VA system healthcare if you think the VA system is what we need as veterans. If not, get rid of it.
Right. Well, that ties into the healthcare law,
Yes.
Affordable Healthcare, Obamacare, it's affectionately called.
Yeah.
Well,
He cares a lot.
Yeah. Well, he really wanted a single-payer system. Is that where we're headed, to a VA system nightmare with the general public, you think, under the Obamacare law?
I hope not, because like I said, the veterans, we're used to following orders. We're used to sitting around and waiting. I mean, we're used to that, being a soldier. The rest of the people couldn't stand for some of the stuff. Like I said, go down to the VA and see the long waits just to get your blood drawn, or just find a parking space. When it comes to the affordable health care tax, first of all, it is constitutional. I hate it, personally. I don't like it. I can't stand it. You and I talked on the radio once before. I can't stand it. I thought it was wrong. It's a bad tax. But it was passed in the legislators. The executive branch enforced it. The Supreme Court upheld it as a tax. Now, the House needs to start tweaking that tax and whittle it down back to something normal. And everyone talks about it being repealed. Well, it can't be repealed until after there's a Republican president put in. Even if we get a Republican majority in the Senate, it takes 2/3 vote to overturn a veto. And we're not going to get that. So how do we fix it so it's not going to kill our system?
Right.
So we don't go into a single payer. And there's an Australian model, which sounds pretty good, where you give everyone pays a tax. Right now we all pay tax on Medicare. Comes out of your check.
Right.
Increase that tax a little bit. That becomes your basic insurance. You break your arm, you're taken care of. This is the Australian model. Then we get to pay for our own insurance on the private sector. That way, if you want birth control for your employees, it's on your plan. If you need mammogram, it's on your plan. If you need a prostate exam, it's on your plan. If you don't want any of that stuff, it's not on the plan. So that's not one size fits all. I don't think our country will ever go to a single payer system, government-run insurance. Our government can't run things. Our government's good at giving money to let other people run stuff. Look at every program our government has run, and tell me one that has become a successful model that the corporate world and the rest of the world goes, that is something I got to follow, because that is just top notch. That's the benchmark. That is best in class. It's not. Our programs become mirrored in bureaucracy and becomes a jobs program to suck money out of the taxpayers. So I hope that God would never become a single payer, single provider insurance company.
That's why elections are so important.
Yes.
Right?
All elections are important. And elections have consequences, and everything means something. And of course, all politics are local. And what's important in the 18th district may not be important up in the Dallas area or out in Utah. You can't apply one big national platform to each little thing, because things change in each demographic area, because politics are local.
Let's talk about the 18th Congressional District. With the redistricting, you have champions, you have the wards, you have some I-10. So demographically and financially, it's spread out. How about how is small businesses faring in the 18th Congressional District, and what can be done as far as entrepreneurial spirit? Is it still there in the 18th Congressional District?
Depends where you go. Because like you said, when they redistrict it, it's pushed it farther west and farther north. It goes all up to Cypress Wood, up in the Spring area. There is some business along 1960 up in that area that's thriving. The northwest part of the district, I see business opening all the time. Now when I go over to Acres Home, go over to 5th Ward, all of a sudden I start seeing things boarded up, and it's not thriving. And you go down to 3rd Ward, it's starting to make a comeback. Actually, 3rd Ward is doing really well. Downtown, Midtown is also doing well. Heights, fantastic. Get down south towards Sunnyside, once again, it's not doing well. And why is it not doing well in those areas? Well, part of it is transportation. The other part is no one's advocating to bring in businesses and give incentives to those small businesses, as well as medium-sized businesses, to start creating jobs. If you bring in some good-sized manufacturers to your district, that area, that creates other suppliers, small businesses, that now feed into that big company.
Right. And I know Texas is thriving as far as transplants from California and New York, the more so-called liberal states, and that's probably helping Houston. And, well, we have a key governor race here in Texas as well. Do you think there's still, you've been out on the campaign trail, what's the biggest problem you're hearing from the 18th Congressional District as a whole?
Jobs, the economy, education. Those are the things they are really talking about. Now, when it comes to education, I do not believe the federal government belongs in education. I believe that
state level
should be local level. I think, state, you have a few people up there at the Department of Education that says, okay, here's some money, we'll give out some grants and kind of set some stuff, or policy, that's about it. Nothing more, we're not gonna do anything. State, a little more involved. It's the local school boards that have all the power. And unfortunately, those have the lowest voter turnout. So when you made your voter in the school board elections, get out and vote for those. That's the most important. Go to your school board meetings and talk up, because that's where the actual changes happen. I believe it should be not centralized, but localized action on education. The other thing is the economy. Go back to the veterans. The veterans have the highest unemployment rate in the country, and that's just sad. Why are our veterans coming home from these wars and not be able to find jobs? And no one's hiring them at the pay rate or the skill level that they had in the military. The economy, it's doing real good in Texas. But you know what? It's not doing good in the country. And a lot of our economy is tied to the medical field and to the oil. Thanks to some of the Eagle Shale, the Bartlett Shale, that's helping our economy. It's like North Dakota, the shale fields up there are helping.
Right.
Once that oil starts dropping again, we're going to have some issues with our economy because the rest of the country's suffering. So Washington needs to create policies that help economic growth. Part of those policies, I think, are removing subsidies. The ethanol subsidy is hurting the environment and is hurting our economy, something fierce. And that's where you have to look at Congress and say, look, why am I subsidizing the ethanol? If it can't sustain itself by itself as an industry, I'm not going to pay for it. And ethanol is just hurting our economy. That's why our food prices have gone up, gas prices have gone up, our miles per gallon have gone down in our vehicles because of it. It's creating more pollution in the Mississippi River, creating a bigger dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico, all because we're trying to burn cleaner fuel. The second and third order effects of ethanol are more dangerous. So these are some of the things I think about with the economy and education, how to help it out.
All right.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. We were talking about oil. Is the Keystone Pipeline the answer, you think? That's been opposed by the Democrats, and that's a big issue, whether we should be doing that through the Dakotas and all that. Where's your opinion on the Keystone Pipeline?
Open up the Keystone Pipeline. We have pipelines running across this country all over the place. Yes, there's an aquifer in Nebraska, which they're afraid it might burst and impact that aquifer, which is understandably important. We have a pipeline that goes from the North Shores of Alaska down to the ports of Alaska, largest pipeline in the world. We've had no problems with that pipeline.
Right.
Why can't we have that same pipeline coming out of Canada, bringing all that shale oil down into our refineries here in Texas? I've heard estimates anywhere from 20,000 to 100,000 jobs created from the Keystone Pipeline. That's just for the manufacturing and building of the pipeline. Once you have that thing open, it's going to create more jobs, sustainable jobs here in the 18th district, as well as up and down the pipeline. Why we're not doing it, I have no idea. When big labor and big government, big business, both are saying, build it. Okay, those are opposing teams that got on the same side that this is good. The only people that are against it seem to be people that are afraid of eminent domain and people afraid about the environment. Okay, we have things in place where you get fair market value for your property bought to put something through it. We have the EPA and we have other safety measures to protect the environment. Why are we dragging our heels? That's going to create jobs. And oh, by the way, this oil, Canada is going to give this oil to somebody. And more than likely, it's going to be China.
Right.
So why not sell it to us and then we sell it to China? Why should we let Canada just ship off this oil to China? I guess we can send off to China, we can start buying from Venezuela again, or buy from Saudi Arabia so we can get back involved in more Middle Eastern wars because we got to protect the oil over there. Or we can become energy independent and only have oil coming from North America.
Well, it certainly seems like there's a stop against the energy independence. It's all politics now.
Yeah, because some people, I think, just talk, with no action. And say, well, we need energy independence. Well, here's something that drives you towards it. Let's do it. And here's the things we're going to do to put in there and to protect the environment to ensure that aquifer that's underneath Nebraska is not going to be contaminated. So instead of just going, I hate the thing of, no, I don't like it. That's little 2-year-olds. Come to the table, talk, both sides sit down, talk, negotiate, find a common ground. How can we get this oil from Canada to the United States, create these jobs, and protect the environment?